Hello, I'm Danielle Galligan and I am an actor and theatre maker and piss taker from Dublin.
You didn't add poet in there though at the end of that.
No, I'll say I suppose poet in training maybe, or poet in aspiration. I don't have the.
Yeah, we get to that. We get to that in a minute. Come here. I suppose the first time I saw you on stage, I think was in Contractions in Bewley's. But before we get into kind of the Lear and kind of coming out of the Lear, take it right back. Like, would people that know you from back then say now that you were destined for the life you're kind of inhabiting, or was it a shock to you?
I'd say they might be like, yeah, she was always destined to struggle with something. Because we know it is a struggle. But no, I don't think so. Like, I wasn't one of those kids who like got dressed up and put on shows for my family or anything. My nana took me to she was the one I think that ignited the like love of theater in me, definitely. But no, I didn't really do drama until very late. The first time that I kind of caught the bug, or suppose, or the bug got me, was in transition year when we were like 15, 16 and fourth year basically, and they do a show in my school every year, and we did Oklahoma, and I got to play Curly McLean because we were an all-girls school, so obviously like we just had to suck it up. And I remember you come out and you do the Bright Golden Haze on the Meadow and everything on like opening night or whatever, and my biology teacher leant over to my year head and he said, Jesus, I didn't know that they did the show this year with the lads. They got the lads from down the road to do the show with them. And my year head was like, no, that's Danielle. And he was like, oh, wow. So I think that was like peak performance for me. And I've just been chasing that ever since. My other job. But yeah, and I think that was it then. And people were like, oh, hey, you're good at this. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then I went to Anne Kavanagh's Young Youth Theatre then for a couple of years. But even at that, like if I call a spade, if I'm honest with myself, I think I did want to do it, but I was afraid to admit it, because I think, admitting you want to be an actor is a very vulnerable place to be. And I think as soon as you admit that you really want something, you open yourself up to like fail, essentially. And if you tell people, then they'll be like, oh, she tried, but now she's doing something else. But yeah, so I think if I admit it, like I did a RADA audition and I tried for the Lear. So I did want it then, but it was only until it was only in the last couple of years that I've been like, yes, this is something I want.
So back when you were kind of younger, even in kind of primary school, like was reading a big part of your life? Like, were you a reader?
Yeah, I was a much better reader when I was a child. I read a lot of the Lemony Snicket novels, the series of Unfortunate Events. I had all of them. And then I got like a real penchant for Mary-Kate and Ashley. So I had all the Mary-Kate and Ashley books. And yeah, I was a much better reader when I was a child. I never got into Harry Potter or anything. And then but like that, I fell out of love with it then for years. And then I just started reading plays.
Yeah.
Watching films, and I've kind of like it's only since lockdown I've kind of got back into reading.
So was there something else then that was kind of in school? Was there a different career path that you could have gone? Like, was there what would have, if someone said don't do acting, what was it that kind of was your academia was kind of guiding you towards?
Yeah, I was quite blessed. I was really good at learning things off by heart. Okay. Which passes for smartness, I think, in secondary school. So I had quite a lot of options. I really wanted to do medicine for a hot minute. And then I also had pilot studies. I really wanted to be a pilot then for a while. And then I really fell in love with like psychology or psychotherapy, because I was like, I think that's what, in a way, kind of what acting is as well. Like, it's the study of human nature, or you're trying to work out why your character is doing what they're doing, and have compassion for that character while they're doing what they're doing, even if they're making the worst mistakes in the world. And I think that is a similar maybe to, so that was kind of the other things. I also like had a moment where I really wanted to be a rock star.
Really?
Yeah, I really wanted to be a front man of a band, and I've never really told many people that, but I loved singing.
Were you in a band?
No. No, I wasn't. that's that thing again of that saying that you want something,
Yeah.
and I was too afraid to be like, I want.
But
And
you,
like I had friends in bands, but
you sang. I mean, was singing a big part of kind of you back then? Well, then I know it is now, but I mean, like, was singing kind of something you did publicly?
not really publicly, but there was a choir I went to like singing classes, and I wasn't like, I did some like shows and stuff, but I was in a choir in school. So like every Sunday we'd just be, rocking out up there in the choir gallery, and that was enough for me at the time. But yeah, I loved it, and I still love it. It's the one thing I think when people find their thing that accesses something in me that I find hard to like put like an emotional something in me that I'm like, oh, it's a very, very scary and exposing place, but I quite like that. I struggled with it in the Lear a lot. Then when I went on to train, I was like, I couldn't. I get this really bad twitch here in my lip, like a concentration of all the fear, I guess it must have been. And I remember our first singing showing, and it just was like going like this, like mad. And I could see people were like, like trying to enjoy the sound, but also like, oh God, is she having a stroke?
Or else being the world's worst Elvis impersonator, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I'll add that to my CV, Mark. Thank you so much.
Come here to me, when you decided then, to kind of explore it, obviously, and then up in the Lear, but what was that journey like for you to kind of, because it is a big, I suppose, emotional commitment to kind of go, okay, I'm going to kind of try this.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think anyone who's embarked on an artistic career path at that time when you're young, 18, 19 or whatever, when you kind of make the decision, it's an exciting time, but what am I trying to say? What was the question?
Was it a big thing, kind of a big, I suppose, choice or statement?
Yeah.
By kind of going for the Lear or going to train?
Yeah, definitely. I think for myself, now I was lucky, like I had a very supportive family. Like even like my uncle in Australia and everything was just they were all invested in trying to get me the training that I wanted. Like everyone really rallied around to make that happen. So I had a very secure, like I suppose like my family were very good to me at that time. So, but I still think I was still, when you kind of lighten it or you trivialize it a little bit, I was like, yeah, I'm just going to try it now because I don't really know what else I want to do. And, people frown on gap years, I think, in Ireland a little bit. So I may as well try it now while I'm young. And then when I work out what I want to do, I'll do that instead.
Yeah.
And I think that's a way of like protecting myself a little bit if in case people thought I was shit.
Yeah. But that's not an attitude.
But
you can step into the door of a stage school with, because the minute you go in, it's a serious thing,
Oh yeah, man. Oh yeah, that's like the Hunger Games in there, and it makes you fight for it. It makes you fight for it. It makes you really question a lot of things about yourself, and not just only your love and want and need and drive to be an actor or an artist, but also like, yeah, not to get too deep on it or anything, but like it really is a test of it's like a litmus test of who you are and where you're at in your life and stuff, but like a really aggressive litmus test.
Yeah. But did you love that immersion in the art form? Did you love that kind of sense of, let's say you were very good at kind of learning stuff off, but this is a different muscle now. I mean, obviously you have to learn things off in relation to like lines and techniques and stuff, but it's a very different, immersion.
Yeah. It is like a cellular immersion, like every little bit and inch of you, like every thought, is kind of framed in a new way by this like super actor that you're going to become, kind of this like Lear 2.0 super actor or whatever. But yeah, and I think that was it's funny because you start to, you've been going along on your life, on your tracks, and all the people are there beside you in the lanes, you're all on your own sports day or whatever. And then you start to, your track like takes a bit of a turn, and not that you have to leave people behind, but I do remember my friends and like the guy that I was with at the time, they had to kind of reframe with me as my life started to reframe. And as I became so like, you're immersed, you're like absorbed in it. You're kind of in this like womb, I suppose, for lack of a better word. And I loved that. I did love it. Jesus Christ. But like some days you felt like going into college was like experiencing a car crash. It was really scary sometimes, but my God, it was incredible. And I remember I remember at the time, like there's just even tiny small moments. Like I remember we had to, you hear that like proverbial or anecdotal thing of like, just be a tree for a day. And everyone's like, oh, you went to clown college is what all my friends kind of used to say to me. And yeah, like there was an element of that as well, of the freedom to roll around on the floor and be a starfish for 5 minutes. And no one thought it was a weird thing. No one thought it was a self-indulgent thing. And like little discoveries like that, I really feel that I didn't really mind them enough at the time, because you're kind of just, you're in survival mode and you're on a track to go forward, and you're trying to just absorb and learn as much as you can. And in terms of the place where it gives you the room and the space and forces you every day to meet yourself and to meet your artistic self and to meet your emotional self. And that's, I think, a real gift and a real lesson for later that I've taken into, like, you take many things and you leave some things behind because you're like, oh, that doesn't read or doesn't resonate with me or whatever. And that's fine too. But there's definitely a lot of those moments that I'm like chasing those starfish moments now from the Lear in my later career. I'm trying to find like in rehearsal rooms of like, that thing of, this feels so bizarre or stupid or embarrassing. Oh, what will people say? But and I think if you dig deep enough into those, like, you really find some amazing, great stuff.
I'm always fascinated as well, because it was kind of my experience when I was kind of starting. I had like friends who had no notion. They weren't, they watched, obviously they were into the arts and watching films and reading books, but they had no idea what I was doing. And they'd come and see shows, but like, and things, start to become very, very different then. But in some ways, having a foot in both worlds can be quite helpful as well. That you're not, that you're immersed in one way, but it's not a complete life immersion. Do you know what I mean? You're not kind of, you also have to deal with, normal stuff or other stuff. And was that kind of what it was like for you, kind of that you had that?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely, I've always tried to keep my foot into camps, out of like necessity, kind of, because I always had to have, like, I didn't have a very strenuous part-time job. Like some other people, would go, we trained sometimes like 60-hour weeks, and then people would work jobs in the evenings on top of that. Like I didn't have to do anything like that, but I did have weekend jobs, like Saturdays and Sundays, working in a restaurant and then working for my mom, and then just like little bits and bobs to keep some money in your pocket, because it was, it was hard. Like, girls got to have her pints, and like, what can I say? But so in terms of that, like, I definitely always had something else that I had to show up for, and as much as like I hated going to work on a Saturday or a Sunday, it did make me, it framed, I suppose, the experience for me. And also, you have to realize that it's not the be all and end all. And like, I think I had to learn as well, then coming out of the, like when you were birthed then, and you're looking for that amniotic fluid, safe fluid of the Lear, and you don't have it anymore, and you're out in the world now. And then, like, I always had a part-time job. I worked as a cocktail bartender, and I loved that as well, because it was so, like, of course it did distract me away from the career, probably to my detriment at times, but definitely I think it's important, because your self-worth gets so wrapped up in your career. And whereas other people go to work 9 to 5 and then have their hobbies and stuff that they get enjoyment from, I think when you're an artist, sometimes, that, is it Seamus Heaney? No, Patrick Kavanagh, I think, that has that quote about when he's like, I don't know what, I can't remember now, why did I bring this up, but about whether he's an artist or whether he's a poet just when he's writing a poem, or the art, whether you're a poet all the time 24/7, and you're using all of that for that 5 minutes it takes you to actually write the thing. And I think my self-worth and a lot of our self-worth is wrapped up in the work. When you're doing the work, like, you're only as good as your last job or your current job or your next job, and to have something else where you're also valued and vital and part of an ecology that's awake, that I think is really important. And even go on.
And also partially ignored. You just a cog. Jimmy,
exactly.
Just get on with it. It's not important who you are, it's important what you do, and that's it.
We are just anxious narcissists. I think sometimes. But even I wanted to take a minute just to say, like, even you doing these like access chats throughout lockdown, I think is just such a nice, like, I remember the first time you asked me, I was like, oh God, yeah, like, oh yeah, I'm an actor, I'm an artist. Sometimes when you're out of the job, you're because you're not actively doing it. You're like, am I though? I haven't acted in however many months. And little things like this, just as an aside, it's nice to be reminded that you know, we have something to say, I guess.
Well, hopefully you'll feel that way in a half an hour. I should say the emerging from every actor that I've spoken to, like, has that moment when they leave, whether it's college or whatever it is, when they kind of go, right, that's done. Now, come on, world. And that, and not horrific moment, but that moment of kind of going, okay, okay, well, if it's horrific, fine. But that moment of kind of going, what next? And how did that feel?
Well, I think mine came a little bit later, to be honest, because again, I was just in a really lucky position. I had an agent because I did a year in drama and theatre at Trinity and then transferred to the Lear. Okay. I was a traitorous beep, I guess, and they still have never forgiven me. But anyway, no, I'm joking. But so I had an agent when I decided to stay with my agent. I'm with Lorraine Brennan.
Yeah,
she's like second mother. She's brilliant. And so I was lucky that I had that, and I also got cast in The Train before I actually left.
Okay.
Was it before I left or just as, anyway, I can't remember now. But yeah, so I came out with an agent and with a paid gig with a company that I had still have so much respect for, and a really special gig, you know, a once in a lifetime kind of living those characters. And that was all brilliant. And then you get, I was like, okay, this isn't so bad. This is fine. This is great. And then, you know, other people were struggling and then other people were also flying. So there was such a smorgasbord of experiences going on between the 16 of us. And then, I got to Christmas, and because that was in DTF. So then post that, then we redid Contractions.
Yeah.
Which was, I think, the first Lear production to go and have a life outside.
Yeah.
No, but and then absolutely, you know, F all, sorry. But and I was like, oh, and so Christmas obviously is a very distracting time anyway, so it was fine. Yeah. And that's when I started working in the bar then.
Yeah.
And then I went through a year where I didn't like, not that I didn't work, I did work, but you know, you do a lot of work for free.
Yeah.
And you do a lot of graft, you do a lot of emailing of like, hey, look at me, and you're trying to convince someone that you're great and they should work with you when you actually don't really believe that about yourself yet because you haven't done enough work. So it was so that's when I think it happened to me. It was kind of like the following year where I was like, wow, okay, this isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
So I didn't think it was going to be easy, and then it was kind of easy.
Yeah.
And then everything just, like, you know, I want to say ripped away, but that's very dramatic. But then it was a hard year of graft, and again that thing of meeting yourself and going, okay, well, this is the perfect time to quit. And all those things you said all those years ago about, well, I'll work, I'll see what I'll do. And then, you know, if I find something else. And I had found the bar at that stage, and I was really into making cocktails. I loved it. And I loved everything about it. And I was like, I could just do this. And then that's when I was like, why am I graft? Like, not that some people have grafted way harder than me, absolutely, but I did graft, and I was like, why am I doing this? This hurts. This is painful. I'm crying. I have no self-confidence. I have no money. This is ow. Yeah. And then, and I think that's the thing of, like, you have the little voice from down beneath you. Is like, because you don't, not that you can't do anything else. Of course you can, but like, you don't want to, and you're here fucking despite yourself.
No, absolutely, and it's you know, because that again is an interest. It's kind of, it comes up quite a bit for people who kind of, you know, burst out of college and get a prize gig. And, I mean, what an amazing gig to do, though. I mean, like, and also I just say the company and the script and, you know, the music and everything was fantastic, but also the resonances and the fact that those women were all by and large still around, and in a way the time is still around with us as well. You know, the kind of the legacy of what happened, you know, with the train bringing the bowel contraceptives down from the north. But what a clever idea, you know, to do a musical, you know.
Absolutely. I just think that it was a really singular experience and a very singular show. And that's me obviously being in it, being like, oh, aren't we all great? And I don't mean that. I just mean that, I think that yeah, I think it was such a special experience. And the people involved, also thought to come out and go straight into, a cast where there was more, like, all the women, cast was full of women, a story based on real women, real heroic women, and directed by an also very heroic woman, was a really, like, an experience that I think I took for granted. I was just like, oh, brilliant, all the moths. And I've been quite lucky in my career to work with really formidable and kick-ass women similarly. But yeah, that was a really, I suppose, just, yeah, so clever. And I think the way the medium through which the story was told reflected the women as well. When you always want, like, your form to reflect your content in a way. And it was incredibly serious and like brave and ballsy thing to do at the time, but it was also the cheekiest.
Yes, exactly.
Cheekiest of things. And those women are so, like, some of the most intelligent women I've ever spoken to, but also cheeky. Like, Nell McCafferty is cheeky as fuck. Yeah. I'm sorry. And I just thought that at the time I didn't realize actually how clever the choice was. And looking back now, I'm just like, Jesus, yeah. That's really, like, your perfect kind of form reflecting content experience with the show.
But I think that was I didn't see the original Brooklyn. I saw it when it was in the Abbey, and even that was kind of, it was funny because you kind of go, there was what I loved about it was that cheekiness, that it wore its seriousness very lightly. It was kind of and very cool costumes as well, might I add. It was kind of
absolutely. That was Joan Cleary. Oh, genius. Those dungarees, man. I remember all the girls getting their sexy boots and their skirts. And I was like, oh, what am I wearing? They're like, you have dungarees and clogs. And I was like, class.
That'll do.
Did you see my like curly afro? That was gone by the Abbey.
Oh, I've seen pictures of it, yeah. But yeah, no, it was, yeah.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it was gone. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do think, though, there was something special about it. Obviously, it came back, but for you, that triple threat of kind of, was everything for you as an actress was there in that to explore. So it must there must have been kind of, you mentioned then over the next year about that, because it's a horrible space. I've been there, kind of going, because you're kind of trained in a way and told it's not about you, but when no one's asking you to come and play, it's very hard to not make it about you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, that's it's a space that, I don't think when we do talk about it, obviously, but I don't think it's kind of understood, let's say, or that kind of, and particularly around now, this time that we're in COVID, that it's doubled down on people who are, actors in the main, predominantly actors, because you're kind of going, you're being refused. You can't work because, generally because you're afraid people don't like you or don't pick you or don't rate you. And now the word has gone, well, you can't fucking act anyway now, because so it's kind of hard. But how did you then? The graph thing is something that I would always associate with you and a lot of people that have come up alongside you and kind of around you in that kind of wider generation, that kind of sense of kind of graft. Like, at a certain point, like, were you close to kind of jacking it in, do you think, or was it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Like, there was a time when I was kind of like, my manager, one of my managers said to me, they're like, that, like, I'd have given you the keys to this place already if you didn't keep leaving me to go acting. And I was like, oh, wow, salary. Like, not in a serious way, not like tomorrow I would still have to work and that job as well. But I was just like, and someone is just like, take it, all of it. But yeah, so I think definitely, and even in terms of the graft, like, I didn't even realize that I was grafting. You're kind of just that thing again of, like, when you want it, you're dogged and you lose your ego a little bit, and your pride gets hurt because you repeatedly send emails to people that don't reply to you and things like that. And if anyone's listening that I did that to, I'm sorry. But yeah, and then I think I just got so lucky with I always think that I didn't really realize I was grafting until I look back, even just this year or the year before. I remember it was actually Ash that was the first one that said it to me. She was like, you know what I mean? Like, you're a grafter, blah, blah, blah. I was like, and why I didn't really like I would never would have thought that I was working that hard. Anyway, that's aside from the point. But I think I just like I just really lucked out with my friends and with my professional relationships in that year. Like, you know, for example, like Fionnuala Gigax, who wrote Hostel 16 that year, that was 2016, and that was actually the very end of 2015. We went down and developed that with Druid and Fuel down in the Micklally, and she asked me to come with her, and I was like, why? Like, well, why do you want me to go with you? And she, you know, I was just really like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll come to Galway, cool. In order to like develop the script, or now we didn't need development; it was written, it was perfect. But yeah, and to do that, and for someone to be like, here, I'd love to hear, you know, what would you do with the play? I was like, no, it's fine. I just want to say the lines, kind of. So I think that sparked something within me, and I just kind of followed that without really trying to think too much about it. And I think so in terms of that year, then that like Hostel 16 production really saved me. That was in Fringe that year.
Yeah.
So and then I was grand, and then I got on and got another gig. I got a gig in the Gate, and that was amazing. And then what I came to learn that like then after that, you were like, again, you know, nothing is there's a fierce impermanence. And I think that feeling that we were talking about of like, you know, that feeling when you're birthed or whatever out from your training or out from anything, that doesn't go away, and it doesn't get easier. It's like not every time you come off a gig, but there will be times when that feeling comes flooding back of you're kind of going, oh yeah, shit, okay, now there's now we're here again. And I think that's one thing that like I've come to learn is that, you know, that impermanence is something that you just kind of have to dance along with. You have to just go with the flow. And like, it doesn't get easier. And there are still times when you're like, oh God, I'll never work again or whatever. I remember trying to explain it to my mum about like an audition or something, or just going in for a day, or was it just a meeting? I think, I can't remember anyway. And I was really up to high dough. And I was just like, oh, like really freaking out about it and this and trying to prep. And, you know, I sometimes get very intense on the whole, like Ash will always say about me, she's like, you love reading, you love researching, you love, like, I'll come in and have my homework done. And I love that. But I can get very intense in tunnel vision. And my mum was like, just relax. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Like, it's okay. And I remember just coming back with like, no, mum, because you go to work every day and you're guaranteed a job at the end of the month. Whereas I go to work every day and I could ruin my job every day by missing something, by not being this or not being everyone's epitome of the perfect actor. And I remember throwing that back at her and she was like, wow, I didn't realize the investment or what the investment or the intensity to which sometimes we put like life and death on every day, every audition. You're like, I could ruin my career for the rest of my life if I mess this up.
And then she sat you down and said, stop.
She did that like you know, the rom-com slap.
Yeah.
So you need.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Hostel 16. I just thought that was a phenomenal piece of work, and also it was a landing place for an awful lot of people. Like, you look back on that cast now, and you kind of go, wow. You know, not only was it an amazing piece of work, but also the people that had been at different stages of their career heading into it, and you know, are now at very different stages of their career. But it seemed to be just a beautiful ensemble piece. And I remember talking to both Raymond and Fionnuala around the time and the long journey towards it. But I suppose, was that feeling of ensemble as incredible that on stage as it felt looking in?
I would say so, yeah. I think so. Raymond worked not tirelessly, but really, really hard in a very gentle and almost subliminal way to kind of build that sense of ensemble. Like, we used to spend half an hour every morning just playing keepy uppies, and we try and get to like 144 keepy uppies or whatever. And I was just like, this is great, you know, and just, you know, kicking a ball around the gaff. But it was like this, all these really, the way he works is so, I think he works so deeply. He starts from a very, very deep place, and then almost you kind of, you know, so like subliminally was building ensemble and building characters with us, almost like we didn't even notice. So then you put the lines on top was kind of the last thing that we did. Obviously the script was there because Fionnuala wrote it. And yeah, so I think that I definitely felt that like that sense of ensemble was a really special sense of ensemble. And I think because the piece itself was just incredible, and still is incredible, an incredibly important piece, because direct provision still exists now. I know that there has been a bit more noise about it, or I feel in my little liberal bubble that I live in, there has been more noise about it lately, but at the time people didn't know what it was. So I think in terms of that, like it was a very that piece to me still feels very sacred and very, very special. But definitely it was a thing that I learned. I was like, that ensemble nearly is one of the most important things. Like you always hear you're only as good as the other actor in the scene, and let the other actor play the scene for you. Again, just taking it off yourself, get out of your own way.
Yeah. But, so you mentioned Cost 16, and obviously, there was a lot of those kind of work that kind of started to happen for you then, obviously around the time you were in the gate. And, again, having worked, in such a short career so far, I mean, I want to talk as well, Danny, about the fact that over the last number of years, your kind of film career has really, really started to kind of motor, the kind of film and TV side of stuff. Do you find a huge difference as an actress going between those two spaces?
Like I think yes, there are like loads of differences. But I think that in terms of, I was trying to I was kind of thinking about that for a while. Like some people argue that they're incredibly different, and some people argue that they're not. And I think that there are inherent differences. Like, I've heard of so many times, not so many, but I've heard of a couple of times when, they've pulled someone off the street to go and be in a film, and they've given incredible performances. And like, I was like, whoa, I thought they were an actor. I didn't realize they'd never acted before. Whereas with theater, I think sometimes you don't get away with that as much, because there's a craft, I think, that comes with trying to communicate to someone who's in the back row of a 450 seater venue. And I think that, there's things like that. And so I started thinking about that, and I was like, okay, well, really, because you have to be just as honest, or honest either way. Do you know, like it's that thing of like looking for truth on stage when actually it's all a lie. What? But so I don't want to get too bogged down in that. But I was like, you really, for me, the way I think about it is that you just act for the space that you're in. And I think you just act for the person who's furthest away, or whatever, or you just act for that. And that's a way that I just kind of am able to quantify it, and not try and think about it too much. So if I'm in somewhere like, I don't know, the Lime Tree, and I need to get all the way to the back row, the message, I'm trying to keep the message the same, but just like the form of communication, like a lot, obviously different. If someone's in the room with you, you're just going to talk to them. If someone's across the road, you're going to shout and be like, how are you? And I feel the same can be applied to film. Now, I'm still very early and at the start, so I could be talking absolute bullshit, but I do feel that even when on film, they do a thing where they go, okay, and punch in, and they'd like change the setup, and it's like this much of your face, and that's when I get really like, oh no, stop looking at me. So I think it helped me in a way to not get like self-conscious of being like, okay, just like communicate the exact same intention. It just act for the space as if the audience member is right there, like in a new show, or if they're doing a wide or a mid, it's the same thing. So that's kind of the way that I quantify it, and try and just keep that in my brain. And then of course you'll always get the director that's like way too big, which is good for me, because I was often told that they were like, I was always told in the Lear, don't hide your light under a bushel. My voice teacher would always be like, what, Danielle? Can't hear you. So for me now to be the other way, I think is definitely a progression.
I mean, obviously, within the kind of film medium, you've been on even such short periods of time, you've been kind of always interested in people being on, the big sets where it's like, machine with like Netflix or with HBO or whatever, and then with kind of small indie films and shorts. So I think the behavior around those two spaces are very different, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely. Like, I think there's a difference. I don't know. I just love doing short films. And again, I've worked with just really amazing people. And I suppose, yeah, because everything tends to be like smaller. The cast tends to be smaller. Yeah. There is, yeah. So, and I think that's a really, really nice way to work. And, again, I've been lucky. I've worked with incredible female directors on that as well. And I think that, like, you form really lasting relationships there, definitely. And that's very different to being on something where you're just there for the day, really. You're like, oh yeah, I'll just show up and do my job, and that's that. But again, I don't know. I think there's a it's hard to say. I think I've just maybe have been quite lucky. I've always felt like, oh, maybe this is my inflated ego, but I've always felt a part of something, I guess, a part of something bigger. And there, it is kind of mental when you turn around on big sets and they're like, okay, and they'll call cut, and you've seen like 30 men standing around doing nothing for half an hour, and then all of a sudden they all go and do a job at the same time, and I'm like, what? Surely they don't need this many people, but like, no, everyone is there to do a thing, and that's incredible too. And there's an amazing thing I just not I discovered recently, but that I've experienced recently, of when you're on those big sets. And they're like that. There's just loads of people. Some people just holding a wire, and I'm like, I don't know how important this wire is, but they're holding it like it's the end of their life, and like they're all there like to do a thing to make your performance as not as good as it can be, but to give you the space to do that. And that's a very special feeling, because they go like, it's like, okay, I don't know the words they say at the start, but all the words they say before action, it's like lock it up, rolling sound, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like this ripple effect, or this chain reaction. This is going to sound very wanky now, but this like chain reaction of all these people clicking into place to fuel like one thing that you just happen to be at the center of. It's not about you, it's about that. And that, it has been like a really magic feeling. It reminds me of that time, that feeling when you're on stage and the audience are really with you. And sometimes it feels the opposite, and people, you're like, oh God, I really don't, not that I don't have them, but you can feel it can be a very lonely feeling as well sometimes up there. But I think on those big sets, like the professionalism that I've encountered there is incredible. And that feeling of that chain reaction of everyone just like clicking into place to fuel like an interaction between two people is amazing. Sorry. Yeah, no, I'm waffling now. But
no, you're absolutely right. And I suppose it's interesting that you kind of bring that back to the theatre, particularly in the last kind of 3 or 4 years for you. There's collaborators. I mean, obviously you went on then to kind of develop your own theatre company, but before that there was kind of, there were a lot of collaborators that you kind of worked with over the last 4 or 5 years. And is that something that you kind of, not yearn for a like, but I mean, does that kind of mean something special to you, to kind of have a group of people that around that are kind of in and out of each other's kind of work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so lovely. Basically, it kind of feels like not dating, but you go on your first date and you're like, oh God, oh shit, what am I going to say? Blah, blah, blah. And then they text you the next day and they're like, hey, do you want to hang out again? And you're like, oh my God, they like me. So I think for me, it's like, that's oversimplifying it, obviously. But yeah, when someone wants to, like, to have someone be like, here, I wrote this part for you because I worked with you before and I liked you, like, that is just, God, there's very few feelings, maybe, I think that add up to that. Like, just such a, like, I don't know, it's just really, really lovely, and it's a privilege, and I often find there's so many times that hasn't happened, and that's okay too, because like you learn from those experiences as well, and sometimes it's not about me or what I've done, but it's about the room. Like, for example, like, Jeddah Debris and Keira Smith, I just think are like a symbiotic relationship for the ages, and I want them to run the Abbey in a couple of years and all this kind of stuff. And so when you click in like that with your tribe, or with people who are of a like mind, it's it's an absolute special thing. It's a magic thing, and I feel that with Chaos Factory. Like, I don't know where I found those girls, but I'm just so thankful for whatever. I think it's Flula Gigas kind of brought us all together. She was the common one, but and then as well, working with Murmuration as well at the moment, like that's another really special group of people that I really, and with those two, without those, the company and that collective, like, I really don't know what 2020 would have been for me, but I do look, I definitely do think that is something lovely. And it's that thing, there's a safety there of, and you have a quick hand, like a dialogue of sorry.
Yeah.
That's the end.
No,
but I think that
I mean, you mentioned there, I mean, like All Honey was another one of those kind of shows for me. I just loved it. But it also kind of there was something else going on behind that with people emerging into a different kind of space, and you could feel it in the room. And also then, as you mentioned, Murmuration with Summertime and this year in the Fringe. But again, very, very, very different forms, a kind of a mixture of, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, All Honey is kind of there, and it's amazing, and it's, you know, as close as Ireland's going to get to a kind of a really bizarre Alan Ayckbourn-esque type of, you know, what
it's a farce, yeah.
slightly. But then in the midst of all that, you kind of, you know, you're in something like Her in Theatre Upstairs, and, you know, and again, those kind of beautiful short. I suppose what I'm interested in is kind of that the work that you've done as an actress, and then the work that you're now exploring as a theatre maker, say with Chaos Factory, and it's a whole different muscle. It seems it's a whole different kind of experimental space where. And what I'm interested in is how have you allowed yourselves that freedom to kind of go, fuck it, all right, let's just go down here.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose, again, there's definitely an element of me trying to chase my starfish self from the Lear, like, definitely. But, and then I think, well, did I say it at the very start of this of like, oh yeah, she's always bound to struggle with something or whatever. Like, I often feel that, like, I'm not happy unless I, you know, it's something I'm challenged, or I'm, you know, yeah, like if I get too comfortable in anything, I tend to not switch off, but I'm just like, oh no, how can I make this harder for myself? I guess, I don't know. But, and I think that there's something in, my mum used to always say, feel the fear and do it anyway. Now, I don't know if it's a Lorraine Galligan original, but I always attribute it to her. And there is something in that, like, that challenge and that fear that that is real ground for kind of growth. And I think that with Chaos Factory, we just found like-minded people, and a very like, there's a real sisterhood there and a real bond, and there's real safety to explore and to be and to expose and to push boundaries. And I think that you know, again, just for example, Fanula has experienced so much theater, like, across Europe, and in terms of, like, she was in the Pantour, yeah. the Pan mentorship, the Pantourship. You can have that one for free, guys.
That has to be a new brand in that.
The Pantourship with Johanna, and, like, so she's always going off and coming back and bringing back these experiences, and I just feel very, very sparked by all of that, and I feel that that's territory that I don't really know and I'm not very good at, and I like being at the early stages of things like that when you're kind of discovering, because you can't really, there is no right or wrong, really, I guess. And I think it's important, because sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes I get not bored, but kind of tired of seeing things in a pros art theater, of like, there's nothing more magical and special than two people just talking to each other on stage and being affected by each other. And I do think that's my favorite thing. But sometimes it's nice to, like, I love dance, and I love physical theater, and I love, like, for example, like Junk Ensemble and Broken Talkers, and even Dead Center, the way they play with different mediums and designs. And there's something there that's really exciting, and that other countries seem to be further ahead, not further ahead, but just more experienced or more open to that kind of work. And I guess, yeah, there's just like a push there to be like, okay, we know that we can talk to people. We know that we can write a scene and communicate something, whether it'd be any good, I don't know. But like, it's kind of trying to push the boundaries there of how to communicate people, and like, we're wow, now I'm doing these things, but you know, we're such sensory beings, and we experience things in so many different ways, like in a really 360-degree way, day to day. And I think there's something about trying to recreate that with theater, of like, okay, well, how many, you know, how many different mediums that we can explore in order to communicate with someone through. Because even bringing it down to, like, very basically oversimplifying it to how people learn, we always thought that people learned best by having a teacher at the room that talked at you. And it's like, no, people, like, I learn much better by, like, listening or hearing songs. Like, everything I've ever learned is a song. And, like, people learn much better through visually. And it's like, okay, if people learn better through different ways, then yeah, let's try communicate in different ways. I've really rabbited on there.
Oh, you have to. You actually led me straight into my next question. So perfect. Just then, you kind of develop a theatre company, you start exploring, and then, you know, to challenge yourself, you kind of yourself and Gavin Costick write this mad epic of a thing. You know what I mean? You kind of go, but I'm fascinated by that kind of I suppose that's what I meant earlier on when I said about grafting. There's one thing about grafting as in kind of, you know, doing paperwork and kind of ringing people, but grafting and kind of going that restless thing about kind of going, you know, okay, I've done that now, I've no idea what this is, so I'm going to jump off that cliff. And
yeah,
I remember precisely chatting to you a couple of years before that happened out here, and you were talking about it, and I was kind of going, wow, okay. But I don't mean it in a bad way. You could sense the epic nature of what you wanted to kind of do. Now I wasn't around at the time, so I didn't get to see it. So, but the was that journey for you kind of an amazing one, or an absolutely terrifying one, or a bit of both?
Terrifying. Yeah, it was also amazing. I think I had a bit of PTSD from that whole journey. Probably, definitely. I think like working with someone who has a mind like Gavin Cosstick and trying to decipher that on like a weekly basis of like, you know, just one of the most intelligent and learned people I've ever encountered. And sorry, I'm even like I'm trying to talk about it, but and then wanting to work with you. What? Okay, sure. So really, I just tried to treat it as a learning experience above all else, because there's very rare that you're going to get to work so closely with professionals in the industry that work to that level. And I think that was something about that show that was just like that was a really what felt like, I know I've used this word before, but a singular experience of having like a Louise Lowe, a Gavin Cosstick, a Megan Kennedy and Eddie Kay, like Marie Kearns, Dennis Clossy, you know, like Aideen Cosgrove, like I just all those, it felt like, you know, as Avengers Assemble kind of in a way. And then the cast as well were just, again, that was another thing of like, how do we have these people? Like, it was just a really, really extraordinary experience. And of course then Fringe, like, and Laura McNaughton at the O'Reilly, like you just keep going, and as you change tiers, there's more amazing people who trusted, and maybe to their detriment, I don't know, but trusted us to really make this thing, and that was incredible. Now, of course, every time you look back on your own performances, or you plural me, you know, there's things that you're like, I wish I did that instead, or I wish I did that instead, and of course, there's a million instances in that process as well, where I'd be like, oh well, that would have been better, or this would have been better, or did it work? I don't know. But the fact that we were able to do it, I think is just still amazes me. But I think I learned so much there. And yeah, it was really incredible. But I think that's the kind of mad work that I just think is really challenging and really exciting. And I don't know, I remember talking to, I'm not going to say who it is because I don't know if they would mind me telling this story, but they were telling me about, they're really, really successful now, like incredibly successful. And they were saying that they did a Fringe show very early on in their career, and they were delighted with it. And it was, you know, that kind of thing of like wonderfully experimental and just trying some things and pushing boundaries. And they felt it expressed and whatever. And it got 2 stars, and like they were devastated. And or were they? I can't remember. I won't speak for them, sorry. But basically they got 2 stars, and then they went, okay, I need to change everything about how I make work if I'm going to be successful. And they did, and they went on, and they did make incredibly successful work here and abroad, and they're amazing. And then I remember them coming into us when we were doing Chaos Factory, and we had our studio in DCC, and we had all our, like, you know, you have all your post-its on the wall of like this scene, this scene, this scene, and there was like, you know, covert condom removal scene or something, and like just random shit on the wall that meant things to us. And they were like, wow. And so what do you know what? And oh, okay. And they told me that story. And then they said that they recently were reading a book, and God, I'm telling this so vaguely, but basically they said, look at your bad reviews or your any reviews, and find the things that you're criticized on, and nourish that practice and nourish that part of your process, because that's like the real essence of you. And they said that they really were they mourned their 2-star self, and they mourned the fact that they went, okay, that's not good. What else can I do that's good? And they said that they kind of got, again, I'm speaking for them, I don't know if this exactly they're feeling, but that they're trying to go back and find their 2-star self now. And I was like, oh wow. And that was such an important story for me to hear, I think, at that stage in my career, because we get so wrapped up in reviewers and what's good and what's not. And I think Jim Swim Party did get maybe a 2-star review or a 3-star review or something. And instead of that really, you know, decimating me, I suppose, because some people say mean things and we're only human and no one sets out to make a bad thing. So I just remember that story of like, you know, no, look for your 2-star self, because that part of you needs to be heard and encouraged and explored just as much as all the other bits. So I don't know. That's how I kind of feel about Jim Swim Party.
I think you're right, because I think there's kind of, you know, there's one thing is taste, and the other thing is experimentation, because experiments by their very nature are not necessarily meant to work in a aesthetic way or an aesthetic pleasing way. Now, they might, and then we're all thrilled and it's fantastic and darn you. But some things, and particularly things, you know, within the context of Fringe or in the context of other kind of festivals, there has to be that room for failing horribly, but finding something that you bring with you, even if it is a failure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember, it reminded me of when I was in college, there was I can't remember the names, but there was a group of lads, and they did this skit on Devil Air in Ireland or something like that. It was a lunchtime show, and at that stage all the shows in Dramstock got reviewed in the Irish Times, so it got absolutely eviscerated, like literally. But the next day they had the full review up on the billboards, and it packed out for the whole run. And then when they did another show similar, nearly the exact same type of show, just with a different theme, and they kind of put that review up again before it even started, and they sold it. So they kind of went, this is what we do, and if you don't like it, you know, here's all the people that do.
Absolutely, and that's totally it. And that's one thing I remember saying to, I think I went to do a professional development session back to go into the Lear to talk to one of the younger years. I mean, normally they try to get like famous people, but I guess they ran out of people. But I remember saying, like, you know, the one thing I've learned about like art is that, like, I remember being like, oh yeah, I really like art. And I remember when I just don't like Picasso. I just don't like him. I never have his stuff. But there's one, the absinthe bottle I actually really like. But I remember being like, okay, but if Picasso is Picasso though, and I don't really like this, so I'm, you know, I must be wrong, or I have bad taste. And it's like, no matter how brilliant, famous, you know, talented, hardworking you are, no matter what you produce, someone's not going to like it. But no matter how little work you put into something and how terrible you think it and how confused you are about what you've put out, someone actually is going to like it out there. And I think that's something to really remember, of like, you know, as long as you have communicated what you set out to communicate with the piece, then let the chips fall where they may. And I also read a really, really amazing thing, that now that I'm talking about Jim Swim Party kind of frames the experience for me a little bit, but it's that passion is the measure of your willingness to let go, and you need to be willing to fail as genuinely as you desire to succeed. And I was like, okay, that is just the best thing I've ever heard about creativity. And I feel that, like, when I look at Jim Swim Party, like, yeah, we were, that was passion. That was a passionate piece. That was a lot of passion from me and Gavin, but then a lot of people just really trying to get as passionate as possible about the piece. And we really were willing to fail, and maybe we did, but what a glorious failure.
But again, failures to do with other people as well.
Totally.
You know, that's taste. Come in, before I let you go, I'm just interested. I obviously, you know, the theatre maker side and Chaos Factory obviously just starting out, and, you know, lots more to come from that vein. But also you as, and I know I jokingly said at the beginning, but you as a writer, because you have over the last kind of, well, I've seen it in the last kind of year or so, been kind of throwing out or putting out writing online. And I know that choice is difficult, because, you know, saying you're a poet or a writer is actually easier, and then going, oh well, yeah, I know, but it's not ready yet. But to actually put something out and go, oh Jesus, to people that you might not know. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, how terrifying is that? And why did you do that?
I don't know.
Why did you do that?
I don't fucking know. Oh my God, this is great. I've never had to talk publicly about this ever before, so I have no idea. I don't know. I think God, there was just one day a real fervency in me or something. I don't know of oh, I just loved my mom so much, and I still do. Sorry, like every day, but it's just one day, just that one day. But and I just there was my emotions were very immediate, and I don't know, there was a lot going on, and I just was like, oh here, oh yeah, I don't know, and I wrote a poem, and I was I think it was it for Mother's Day or something initially. I can't remember, but I wanted to be like, I wanted to celebrate. My mum is an amazing, amazing. Every mum is amazing, but my mum is the most amazing. And I wanted to celebrate that, and I just wanted to be like, it was a way of showing love and appreciation for her, and then it was a way of like, I think I just wanted to share it, and I just I'd never felt so much about wanting to share something. I think with acting, I'm trying to get better at this, but I do have my default setting is like, no, you go way over there and I'll do the acting over here, and then you can come back after, and then you can look at it, do you know, as opposed to wanting to share, just like egoless and just going, I have something I want to share. And I was like, okay, this is a very new impulse for me. And again, I think that thing of like, this terrifies me, so do it and put it up. And I remember that thing of like sharing it, and then like, you know, I was on my own. Literally, I was like, boom, and then I can't remember what I did. I remember again, I'm talking about Fanula loads, wow. But she texted me. She was like, I know that you definitely just posted this and threw your phone away and don't want to talk to anyone. But she's like, it's really good. And then I think I don't know if this is a good thing to say or not, but I'm just going to say it. I think there was something in that I was surrounded by so many talented people who were all able to like do really cool, talented things, like people writing music, people like, you know, writing plays, people making work, people drawing pictures. And I was just like, oh my God, I don't have a thing. I was like, I know I'm an actor, but like, I don't really have a thing. And I was like, I wonder if I'll find my thing or a thing that I can do. And I think I think that poetry has kind of become that for me. But I guess it's just yeah, I don't know. It was definitely started off as like a self-indulgent kind of emotional masturbation, 100%. And then I was kind of like, as I started reading more and more poetry, and you reading books again and reading things, there's always like, I read things and I go, oh my God, I feel so seen. And I feel so, you know, there's times when I think art does that to us, when we're like, oh my God, you see me. I don't know who you are, but like, you see me, I'm not alone or whatever. And I think I started off writing about like very intensely personal things, which maybe, you know, oversharing or whatever, but I don't know. And I had this wanky magnanimous sense that, okay, well, if I share them, maybe someone else will have that idea, or I suppose it's a way of communicating what's going on with me and where I am in my life without being like, this is what's going on with me. And then I think so that's kind of why I did it. And then, man, you know, you're just hounding likes, I guess, online. So yeah, but yeah, no, I would, and now I've kind of grown a love for it, and I guess my confidence is growing. But it's funny because you start right back at the start. I think what I have found that like when you start a new art form or whatever,
yeah,
you start right back at the start of going, I'm really bad at this, and is it good? Is it bad? Blah 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 blah. So I was trying to funnel all those things that I've learned through being an actor and a theatre maker about good and bad isn't a thing, it doesn't exist, into this. And now, yeah, I enjoy it. I just really enjoy it, and other people seem to like it, and I would like to stop maybe posting on social media and maybe start doing it more seriously. But I'm definitely not there yet. And for now, it's just a really nice outlet and something to remind you that you're creative. I think it's so important to just stay creative.
But I think there's something interesting in, I think, because a few people that I kind of are around me on social media that kind of post, like, not necessarily writing, but like, yeah, post like poetry and writing, but some kind of just write really, 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 really well about their day. And I kind of going, I think that there isn't enough actually of creative writing on social media. I think it's kind of the perfect vehicle to actually share that type of stuff. So I think do keep doing it on social media. Is my
Right. Yeah, I also like that it's free. I'm just like, here, have some, like, I don't want to be like, here, have some art, but like, you know, have a little creative moment for yourself for free. You don't, you know.
There is also that thing about inviting the public into like a rehearsal room space or into a space that's not fully finished yet. Do you know what I mean? It's not fully. So like, here's a piece of writing that I've been thinking about, and here's where I am with it. Yeah. Come here. Thanks. I'm gonna let you go before I go down a rabbit hole about poetry. But thanks so much for taking part in this. And look, for anyone that finds us on the internet, we're kind of, I don't know whether we're about, it's October 2020. I'm not sure whether we're about to go back into a level 5 lockdown again. Who knows?
Starting to feel the time capsule.
Forward to having a cup of tea with you or whatever when we get out of this space again. But thanks a million, Danny, and I'll talk to you soon.
And thank you so much, Mark. Thank you genuinely. Like, you and the Axis are doing so much work to try and keep us creative and supported and feel relevant. So I thank you as well.
Thank you very much. Talk to you soon. Bye.